Hello and welcome to another day of English 2. I'm your online teacher, Miss Bear. We have been looking at an expository research project about the fashion industry. Today we are going to look at planning that culminating task as well as what does it mean to be for a source to be biased, and we're going to dig into that a little bit. We kind of touched on it in an earlier lesson, but I didn't really dig into it that much because I knew this one was coming. So before we get too involved in today's lesson, I do want to remind you that this is part of the Common Lit 360 curriculum. This is my Unit 11, their Unit 4, the fashion industry from past to present. And on our agenda, or before we get to our agenda, let me remind you of our research question. Francis Cabot Lowell had a utopian vision for a factory that would make profits for the owners while also improving the lives of the workers. What was his vision? And then to what extent has his vision been realized since its inception? And today we are looking at identifying unstated bias, and we're going to look at your works cited page. And so there are some handouts from Common Lit that we will use to help us with that. So let's make sure that your teacher has given you a copy of the handout that says Identifying Unstated Bias. And you will see on your screen that parts 1 and 2 you will complete independently, and then we'll come back together for part 3. So I'm going to allow the teacher to pause now so that you can complete parts 1 and 2 independently. Great job. Now keep your handout out and turn to page 2, or you should already be on page 2, and I want you to make sure that you are answering these questions as I'm going through them. So let's look at the part 3. So it says investigate the organization and the author. Read the information below from the first paragraph of The Female Workers of Lowell and note details about the creators of this source. Then answer the questions that follow. This article from The Harbinger, a weekly magazine written and published by residents of Brook Farm, a utopian socialist experiment in Massachusetts in the 1840s. Each member of Brook Farm owned an equal share of the farm, worked there, and received an equal share of its profits. According to its masthead, The Harbinger was devoted to social and political progress. So I want you to think about, how was Brook Farm different from most other businesses? I want you to jot an answer down, but leave some room for me to go through that question and answer that with you. Good. So how was it different? So you will see on your screen that most businesses are owned by one person or a small group of people. The owners pay the workers' wages and then keep any profit. At Brook Farm, the workers owned the business and split the profits. So you see that's a very different model from what you see, the two very different models, right? All right, now I want you to flip your page to page 3 and answer the question. I actually want you to answer all 3 of these questions, but again, save some space so that I can review those with you. But I'm going to pause a second and let you answer those before we go over them together as a whole class. All right, let's go over them. What attitude did the residents of Brook Farms most likely have towards the Lowell Associates and other business owners who got rich while paying low wages to workers? They most likely disagreed with this practice and saw these owners as taking advantage of their workers. Next, how was this bias likely to influence any article the residents of Brook Farms might have written about the Lowell Mills? Well, it's likely that they would have written a negative article because their views of the mill system were so negative. Lastly, should a historian who is researching Lowell system mills rely solely on this resource to provide them with a picture of mill workers' experiences? Explain your answer. No, this source displays a clear bias. a historian who relied solely on this source would get an incomplete or slated view of the mills. This historian should seek out other sources from different perspectives to ensure that they see the whole picture. Now, before we move forward with our next section, I want to point out a couple of things. It asks if you should rely solely on the source. That means that you would only rely on that one source. So the answer obviously would be no. But does that mean that you can't use the source as one source and have others that also have other opinions and other ideas? Yes, use that source, but also find others to make sure that you have more than one perspective. And so that's what it means by that unstated bias. Make sure that you're looking at multiple perspectives and that you're not relying on one source that could have some bias attached. So I'm going to pause here and let you complete activities, I think it's 4 and 5, that you will complete independently to review the sources that you have, and then we will come back together and look at some additional information that we'll be learning about today. Great job. Now, let's talk about works cited. I would like for you to get out your 5-minute writing review works cited formatting piece of paper. You should have that. Hopefully your teacher has printed that for you, or you can, you may have it on your screen that you can complete on your computer. So the first section, it is to be teacher-led. So let's look at what we need to be doing with this. So in section 1, it says review works cited formatting. And so in order to format, if you'll just follow along, you've got, when citing a website or an article on a website, you need the following information. So you need this information in order to complete a works cited page. Remember that you're going to have additional sources beyond that Common Lit has provided for you. And so there are some sources that you can use, and that's going to be at the discretion of the teacher that's in your classroom. But one of my favorites is Purdue OWL, O-W-L. That is their online writing lab. They will show you and walk you through creating your works cited page. It will also give you information. I think you should be able to plug in part of that, and they will produce this this citation for you. But you see here your basic formatting. You want the author's name, and you will always go the last name first and then the first name, and then you'll put the title of the article, and then the title of the website, the publication date, the URL. You don't want the HTTP or the HTTPS, and the date you accessed it. So if I were to pull a source today, the date accessed would have today's date. That would be the end of it. And you always want to put your day first. So you want to put the day, and then the month, and then the year. Okay? I'm not going to put a month, day, or year on there right now, because when I'm doing this lesson may not be the same day that you're doing this lesson. And so this will keep the integrity of our video going. So now that you know what you need to do in order to create a works cited and how to cite those sources, you have this great handout that shows you how to do it. So you should have found some resources for homework last night. And now I would like for you to create that works cited page for yourself and for your teacher. And I'm going to pause here so that you can work on that. And then if you have any additional time, I would love for you to continue putting that research together and reading that if you think that you need some additional sources, because maybe the sources that you pulled were all leaned towards one side, and maybe you need to find some additional articles that may provide an alternative view or maybe somebody else's perspective on that particular topic. So After you complete that, then we'll come back together and close out our lesson. But I'm going to let you work on your works cited and some additional research. Fantastic job. We did a lot of work today, and you accomplished so many things, and I'm very proud of you. And I know we're kind of ramping it up. We are getting ready to wrap up this entire unit, but it's going to take some work on your part. So make sure that you have all of your notes, you've pulled them all together, and you are ready to write your research paper. That is all that I have for you today. Until next time, happy learning.